Greetings, friends. Today we will discuss the situation in Ukraine as of November 26, 2024. An enormous number of events have occurred, so let's get started. We begin with the Zaporizhzhia direction, where increasing information from Ukrainian sources suggests that an offensive might soon be launched. According to these sources, the Russian army plans to involve 20,000 to 30,000 troops in this Zaporizhzhia offensive. However, even if such an operation occurs, it is likely to be a localized offensive targeting a specific settlement, such as Orikhiv or Huliai Pole and its agglomeration. Serious large-scale military operations with such a number of personnel seem improbable. Nevertheless, objective control footage has emerged from an area slightly north of the settlement of Robotyne. The footage shows a Ukrainian drone dropping explosives on the forward positions of the Russian army in this location. Based on these events, there has been a shift in the map favoring the Russian army. Moving eastward along the Zaporizhzhia front, we come to one of the most significant developments in the past 24 hours. To understand this, it's essential to grasp the background of the Zaporizhzhia offensive and why Velika Novosilka is of such strategic importance. For clarity, let us refer to the map currently displayed. The map may seem complex, but I will explain. It depicts the Zaporizhzhia direction, highlighting three key defensive lines. The first blue line starts at the top right near Kurakov and extends westward, marking a defensive line slightly northwest of the settlement. Two additional blue lines are visible in the bottom left, representing layered defensive lines. Between these lines lies a significant gap, beginning northwest of Velika Novosilka and extending to the settlements of Dakhna and Alexeyevka. Returning to the map, we can see that the first defensive line runs from the Kurakov reservoir area, northwest of Kurakov, to Dakhna. This line is marked in yellow. Another major defensive line stretches from Huliai Pole in the Zaporizhzhia direction toward Shevchenko. It ends around settlements such as Komar, Tolsta Zaporizhzhia, and Vesela Fedorivka, beyond the Dnipro River. This segment of the front appears to lack substantial fortifications. It seems that Ukrainian engineers or forces have not had enough time to establish additional defensive lines here, resulting in a vulnerable gap. According to military analysts, this gap is where Russian forces aim to breach the Ukrainian defense and advance toward settlements like Havrylivka, Ivanivka, Zeleny High, and beyond. The primary objective of Russian forces in fighting for Velika Novosilka is to exploit this gap, penetrate between the Ukrainian defensive lines, and gain control over the area marked with a red cloud on the map. Initial assessments suggest that Russian command views this operation as feasible and achievable. Now, let us delve into the details of how the situation is evolving, starting with the western flank of Velika Novosilka. Today, objective control footage was published from the settlement of Novodarivka. The 122nd Brigade of the Territorial Defense shared footage showing FPV drones striking Russian forward positions. Based on these videos, there has been a map adjustment indicating that even if all of Novodarivka is not under Russian control, at least its northwestern part is. According to pro-Russian cartographic services, Novodarivka is now fully controlled by Russian forces. As for the western flank, no further updates are currently available. It is worth recalling that news from the past 2 days indicated that Russian units were gradually advancing toward Highway 0510. However, no objective control footage has yet been released to confirm this claim, so the map remains unchanged. Now, let us turn to Velika Novosilka itself. There is a wealth of objective control footage coming from this area, as well as updates on the front line provided by various cartographic services. Let's begin with the farms located in the southeastern section. As of yesterday, according to some mapping services, Russian armed forces had secured the western, northern, and central parts of this area. By yesterday, reports confirmed that the farms had been fully cleared and were entirely under Russian control. Next, we move to the eastern part of Velika Novosilka, where the map has also undergone changes. Here, objective control footage is available, showing combat taking place directly opposite Velika Novosilka itself. In the opening seconds of the footage, we see a column of Russian vehicles moving toward Ukrainian fortified positions within the city limits. The convoy progresses slowly, possibly preparing for or already conducting troop landings. This footage, recorded by Russian sources, does not show much beyond the vehicle movement. However, the presence of objective control footage confirms that Russian units have reached the city limits. Importantly, this footage was published 2 days ago, on the evening of November 24th. It is highly likely that since the footage was taken, Russian forces have made further advances deeper into Velika Novosilka. Combat might now be occurring near areas such as the stadium. Despite this, there remains a critical company-level strongpoint east of Velika Novosilka, shaped like an hourglass. Currently, there is no information about this strongpoint. Pro-Ukrainian cartographic services, however, suggest the possibility of Russian forces maneuvering around the position from both the north and south. It appears that the Ukrainian Armed Forces still hold this position, while the Russian army aims to flank it, forcing Ukrainian troops to retreat or encircling them to create a small pocket. Tomorrow, the first images from within Velika Novosilka itself are expected to surface online. Moving on to the Uspanivka fortified area, we are receiving numerous updates, particularly regarding 3 small villages, Yelizavetivka, Ilinka, and Romanivka. As you can see, the map has been updated to show that the entire settlement of Romanivka is now under Russian control. Objective control footage released yesterday shows Russian forces storming Ukrainian positions along the Hliniana Gully. The footage depicts Russian attempts to advance from elevated terrain, while Ukrainian forces counter these efforts. Some locations and scenes from the footage have been geolocated to this gully, which has led to updates on the map favoring the Russian armed forces. Specifically, the northern parts, including fields and sections of Romanivka near Shevchenko Street, have come under Russian control. Additionally, footage from a strongpoint southeast of Ilinka was released yesterday by Russian sources. This video shows successive waves of Russian units conducting assaults with significant amounts of equipment. The attacks were launched from the direction of Antonivka, encountering minimal resistance from the Ukrainian armed forces. Some isolated mortar and drone strikes were observed, but these did not prevent the Russian army from reaching its objectives. Following the deployment of airborne troops, Russian paratroopers began clearing the remaining resistance at the strongpoint. The footage reveals the familiar structures of the strongpoint, with the final phase of the operation taking place near small central buildings within the position. Based on this footage, the entire area has been updated on the map to reflect its capture by Russian forces. Once again, information has been received from both pro-Ukrainian and neutral cartographic services indicating that the settlement of Ilinka is under full control of the Russian army. Throughout the day, reports also suggested that Ukrainian forces, specifically units of the 79th Brigade, have withdrawn from Yelizavetivka. There have been multiple publications about this, which, while not entirely reliable, cannot be dismissed outright. Moving on, we arrive at Kurakov, which has provided the most significant objective control footage. Let's start with those. Footage from the central part of Kurakov, recorded around midday, was published by Russian sources. In the video, a large number of multi-story buildings can be seen, though the details of the footage are somewhat unclear. The author of the video points out a darkened area in the frame, likely a combat vehicle, such as an infantry fighting vehicle. The footage then shows Russian soldiers disembarking one by one from the vehicle and occupying positions within a 5-story building. This footage indicates that a Russian infantry fighting vehicle reached Kurakove, deployed a smokescreen, and began clearing operations in the building. Another vehicle is seen retreating, presumably returning to base. The location of this building has been geolocated, confirming the deployment occurred at this specific site. Based on this footage, most mapping services have updated their maps to reflect Russian control of parts of the central and eastern sections of Kurakov. This represents a significant breakthrough by the Russian army, creating a dire situation for Ukrainian forces. Additional footage from Russian forces shows advances from Dalny toward Highway 0510 and along it in the direction of Kurakov. These videos, released by Ukrainian sources, depict the activity of the 33rd Mechanized Brigade attempting to counter Russian forces. The footage reveals large numbers of Russian assault units moving through forest belts and roads, supported by numerous drones. Attempts by Ukrainian forces to halt the Russian advance with drone strikes have been ineffective. One specific episode, recorded at this location, led to part of Highway 0510 between Kurakov and Uspanivka being marked as under Russian control. Currently, there is no information about the situation in the forested area near the southern district of Kurakov, a small quarter in the southern part of the town. The status of Ukrainian positions at farms in southeastern Kurakov also remains unclear, as does the state of the defensive network in the southern part of the settlement. It appears likely that Ukrainian forces will attempt to retreat from these areas in the near future, possibly overnight. The deployment of Russian airborne troops in the southern central part of Kurakov suggests that Russian forces aim to push through the high-rises and multi-story buildings to reach the forested intersection. If successful, securing this corridor would allow Russian forces to cut off evacuation routes for Ukrainian troops in the southern district. To evacuate from this quadrant, Ukrainian forces would need to either pass through the southern central part of Kurakov, currently under Russian assault, or follow Highway 0510 and then turn along the forest belt toward the company-level strongpoint between Kurakov and Uspanivka. However, the latest objective control data indicates that Russian units advancing from the south have already cut off access to this forest belt for Ukrainian troops. At this point, only two options remain for Ukrainian forces. The defense of Kurakov has effectively collapsed, and the pace of Russian advances is expected to accelerate with each passing day.